followings in the media sphere. Kash Patel is at every UFC event, flying around on a private jet to get there. He's trying to pay the UFC to do like training days with FBI agents. I just don't think it's going to get investigated, especially like even before these clowns came along. James Krause, I say it every week, but didn't do any jail time. Didn't have like a sentence cast against him. What happened was that James Krause quietly went away. He had to close down his business. He can't coach people anymore. And he can't give betting tips. But he seems to have just quietly disappeared with no real punishment for doing gambling fraud. And I think that's because the more this stuff gets in the news, the worse it is for the UFC and their sponsors, who are all betting companies. It's better to just not ever talk about it and pretend it didn't happen. So that was bonkers. And honestly, David Onama's in the main event. This is the funny part. Delgarian was with James Krause and then moved to Factory X, and now a number of Factory X fighters are coming under scrutiny from fans. But Onama was with Krause. And in the main event, he didn't do anything, which would be super suspect if that wasn't what David Onama does. He just loses the first round in every single fight. Just never got going. Steve Garcia looked really good. But man, just like, if everyone's faking, how do I enjoy this sport anymore? Well, I'll tell you how. The biggest card of the year, probably. I mean, it's looking like it. UFC 322. This is head to toe, not you, Valentina, bangers. Main event, Jack Della Maddalena. Islam Makhachev just wrote a big article about this. Was by no means exhaustive on who each man is. I didn't really talk about a lot of striking, to be honest. I just talked about double collar tie, jab and dip, breaking inertia on the ground. But I think this is about as good a fight as you can put together. Looking at the weigh-in, or not the weigh-in, sorry, the stare down, Makhachev was looking big. But then Della Maddalena, a lot of his weight is in his like midsection and his fucking gigantic thighs. This also marks an interesting occasion because it is a slacky boy, a long-time slacky boy, long-time listener of the podcast. I think at one time Patreon boy, but a slacky boy versus probably the pound-for-pound best fighter in the world right now and one of the best fighters I've ever seen. So all kinds of intrigue for yours truly. I would highly recommend you read the article. It's 4,000 words. It's it's got a narration track if you don't want to read all that, if your eyes hurt from reading. But I tried to pick out things that I thought they were interesting things about each man, but they were also they're things that stand out as a sort of unique, not unique, but almost unique about each man. And they're also things that are going to run head to head into each other, like Jack Della Maddalena's ability to scramble and like force the opponent onto the front headlock rather than get stuck in a guard. Going to play into Islam Makhachev's love of the DAS, particularly the short arm DAS that he has popularized. And I've been strangling white belts with ever since he first did that. Like, well, let's get good at this. Still not getting it on the good black belts, but yeah, getting it enough that I'm confident it works. The way I've been scoring it is to get the forearm grip. Firstly, the really cool thing he does is he gets the guillotine and then he just yanks both hands through. So the arm that he was going to be pulling into the throat for the guillotine, he straightens that out and that pulls the one that's holding it through. And then he punches it straight to the forearm. And then I've found great success by sort of falling on your side onto the opponent's head and pulling their shoulder up into their neck. Not even bothering to hook their leg or anything like that, just trying to stay weight going through them into the ground. But yeah, Della Maddalena obviously got filmed doing a lot of DAS defense with the great Craig Jones, who, if you've seen, Craig Jones has a few moves he hits at seminars. He's kind of like John McEnroe. You know, if you go and see the Masters tennis, John McEnroe is going to have a quote-unquote tantrum because that's his move. You pay to see it. Craig Jones has a couple of moves, like the octopus guard to picking the guy up and putting him in a bin. And the other one that he's really good at is he lets people get the DAS, sort of encourages them to walk around towards his head and rolls over his shoulders onto their back from in a DAS, which is really impressive. Maybe not a locked DAS, but it's very cool when you see it. Most people's DAS defense is belly down starfish. And it's actually, it works so well, but it also, when you're doing it, you feel like this is not a practical athletic fighting position. I'm embarrassed to be doing it, but they have to let go of the lock to go and do something else. So you got a bit of a warning. It's just ridiculous to be laying down flat on your face with your arms and legs splayed. But anyway, I didn't do hypothetical game plans. I think I was really thinking about how much different Khabib and Islam are. And Khabib was always full on aggression, get to the grappling quick and do it as much as you can. You know, he fought like he absolutely knew how his bread was buttered. He fought like he didn't have the skill acquisition that Islam Makhachev did. Islam Makhachev seems to be able to like learn every area of the game pretty well. And he benefits enormously from his roundedness in that, like, striking is a lot easier when the guy is afraid of your wrestling the entire time. Not just because he will hold back on combinations. He won't commit to big punches so easily. And if he does start committing, you can just bundle him over by timing a shot. But more than that, like, a lot of the time you're going to take him out of the kicking game altogether. Which means, for most people, I said this at the end of the article, but for most wrestlers that means almost nothing. Islam Makhachev actually has a really good left leg kicking game. He's a southpaw and he throws his left body kicks and left high kicks a lot through his fights. I mean, you know, he came into the second Volkanovski fight having had a bit of success in the first fight, and he immediately got to work because he was not getting punished for it in any way. That second Volkanovski fight, I wrote the article on the things that worked for him in the first fight. And, you know, I'm not claiming he reads my articles, even though one competitor in this fight does. I'm not claiming that Islam does because he don't have internet. But you can see he went away, he looked at the film, and he said, this works. Why don't I just do that right from the start and see if I can have the same success? Onus is on the opponent to improve themselves from last time and deal with it. But yes, the ability of Makhachev as a counterpuncher and as a kicker out in the open, and the counterpunching, like, this is all made easier by the fact that he's a strong wrestler, because his defensive work is almost entirely just straight line retreat. Which, if I'm looking at a striker, I go, that is trash. You're going to get run onto the fence. If I'm looking at a guy who can level change at any opportunity and get into a decent clinch and fare well from there, it's not as much of a problem, especially as he keeps the center of the cage most of the time. If you watch the Poirier fight, the first thing I was blown away by was how much jab and dip was going on in that fight. Every entry was a jab and dip. And his jabs occasionally landed. He never really followed up on it in any way. But the reason that he couldn't follow up on it in any way was that Makhachev would just drop away. He wasn't going to shoot. Occasionally he shot on the return, and you saw Dustin wrestle him off pretty easily. Because that's the thing, you know, it's the difference between the guy shooting under your elbow and you being in trouble from the get-go, and the guy shooting at you when you've dropped into almost a wrestling stance. In that regard, like, the level of Makhachev is not that much higher than, because Dustin Poirier is not known for his great takedown defense, but by putting himself in position to defend the takedown after every entry, he could defend the takedowns. The problem was that, like, he was doing it and then Makhachev would give ground, and you can't chase someone while level changing, or at least it's very hard to. Unless you're Jordan Burroughs and you can run on your knees. But jab and dip comes from boxing, because you jab as you enter and you dip, because the agreement is that you're going to punch. You're going to trade punches. They're going to throw back at you as soon as you throw at them. And if they don't, you'll probably get in on them anyway, but they're never going to run away. And in MMA with this giant cage, running away is a totally legit thing, which is why Dustin develops that shifting style in the first place. But you can't be doing that against someone who's going to drop on your hips every opportunity. But anyway, all of that is to say, for Khabib, my Killing the King assessment was always tire him out, let him run at you, circle off, low activity through the first round, but make him come after you. And then as he slows down, start to pick him off, because people don't sprint at you forever. It was the same sort of advice as with Ronda Rousey and Tom Aspinall. You know, the more they settle down into a kickboxing match, the more it works for you. With Islam Makhachev, I'm saying get him on the back foot right from the start, because you don't want to be at the mercy of a kicking game that you can't come back on. Now, actually, Della Maddalena, if you watched him against Gilbert Burns, the one that stunned him near the end, he catches a kick, parries it, and comes back in with a left hook and stuns Burns, which is great. you know, I want to see that loads. If Makhachev throws a kick, I want you to fucking stick to it and come back with a counterpunch while he's on one leg. But